Howdy, guys, and welcome to night 72 of Big Brother Season 23's Overnight Feeds Recap. And welcome to Cliff Notes from outside the Big Brother house. All right, do y'all remember in past recaps, I told all of y'all, said, I know it's a little boring, it's a little predictable right now, but just be patient. It'll change once we get the Cookout Alliance having to turn inwards, go after each other. It's going to get so much crazier, so much chaos going on. It'll be worth the wait. Remember when I talked about that? Remember when I also talked about in the last day or two saying, yeah, something may be going on inside the house, that there could be some kind of twist. Maybe we've got a battle back happening, something going on beyond just them pre-taping just because of Friday night episode. Remember why I said that as well? Well, I was wrong on all of that. Yeah, I was hoping for a little more excitement. We didn't have it. Last night was just a standard double eviction, and the dominant alliance of the 6 African-American players in the Cookout Alliance has now been replaced or taken over by a smaller alliance of the 3 men who looks like they're just going to steamroll to the final 3, probably, maybe, most likely, without a whole lot of chaos or uncertainty up until that point. Yeah. Was it dreams or wishes or dreams that your heart makes, something like that? Yeah, well, not quite as much chaos as I expected last night, but we'll see what happens. All right, so just as a recap, last night Tiffany went home as suspected in the first half of the HOH. Quite the player. Props to Tiffany for everything she did. The one surprise of the evening, well, maybe not the only surprise, but the big surprise of the evening, Azah won an HOH. Azah won the first competition of the season for her. I don't know. Is she going to turn into a comp beast, win everything from this point on? I kind of doubt it, but hey, surprise me. But Azah wins her first HOH, and she immediately targets Hannah, who goes on the block next to Xavier. Now, we'll talk about that because she told Hannah that she was going on the block, but Xavier was actually Azah's target, and Hannah was not the intended target. We're going to talk about whether that was actually true or not, but it doesn't matter because at the veto competition, What the Bleep, one of my favorites, I won What the Bleep during my season's double eviction. So I have special fondness for it. But Kylan wins What the Bleep this season in a tiebreaker with Xavier. The two strong guys are going to the end on veto. Kylan wins it. Kylan immediately gets up and says, I made some promises, some loyalty. Well, way to put your cards out there on the table, Kylan. And he says, because of that, I'm pulling Xavier off the block, which means that Azah has no choice but to then put Big D on the block next to Hannah. But it doesn't matter because in a 2-0 vote, both votes by Kylan and Xavier, they both vote to send Hannah out the door. So yeah, it's disappointment. What I do know is that we just lost two very strong, very strategic players in the house last night. Either one of them would have justifiably deserved the title this season. I would have been happy to see either one of them win. They were strategic players, and that's the kind of player I really admire and respect. But they both go home. That happens sometimes with Big Brother. It's just the way the game happens sometimes. I do think both of these players, ultimately, their loyalty to the Cookout Alliance. Yes, I know they achieved the objective, and I know they're proud of that. But I think their loyalty to the Cookout Alliance really affected their game very much negatively, especially Tiffany. She had so many alliances that she could have worked with, but she chose the Cookout Alliance as the higher priority, the higher objective. And I do think she paid a bit of a price and went home when she did because of that. But again, props to both of these ladies, amazing players, and I expect to see one or both of them back at some point on down the road. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Azah's HOH and what she did and all of that before we get into the live feeds. As I mentioned, Azah told Hannah that Xavier was her target and that Hannah was just going up there as a pawn. Was he? Was that really what Azah was planning? I was going to say I just don't know, but I kind of think that's not the case. I just don't believe it. Azah has spent too much time over the past week or so, really throughout the whole season, not really having a real tight relationship with Hannah, really being more buddy with the guys than Hannah. She had talked in the past week about how she really wanted Hannah gone. Now, part of that was because she wanted Tiffany to be saved more so than Hannah. But I also think that she just didn't have a real tight relationship with Hannah to start with. And so I just think that was just something she told Hannah to ease the pain a little bit. But I think Azah's goal always was to send Hannah out of the house if she had the option to do so. And she did it. She won the HOH. She sends out the only other woman still in the house. Now think about this. If she hadn't done it, yeah, I know Hannah and Azah, not necessarily the tightest two ladies in terms of working together and all that. But if she had done things a little differently, if Kylan or Xavier had gone out of that house instead, you could have had Azah and Hannah on one side and two guys on the other side. It would have been tough to do. Once Kylan won that veto and pulls Xavier off, the die is kind of set. But before that, if say Hannah had put up Kylan and Xavier as targets as well, Kylan wins the veto. He pulls himself off. At that point, she could have put up Big D and Xavier. It kept Xavier on the block. Make sure one of the guys go home. But would Azah have done that? Would she have put Big D at risk? I think it's more possible that she probably still would have put Hannah on the block. Hannah probably still would have gone home. So Azah's HOH, maybe her selections didn't really matter that much. It became more important who won that veto. And since Kylan won it, the guys keep control. Hannah's out of the house, and now we've got Azah and the three guys. And we're going to see how that happens. I don't know it's going to work the way Azah was hoping it was going to work. All right, let's talk about the feeds a little bit before we wrap up, because there were conversations. It was nice to finally get the feeds back after being down for several days. There was a whole big old gap of stuff that we missed, because remember, everything we saw last night was filmed on Tuesday or Wednesday, and things had happened that we didn't know. So we come back to the live feeds and have to play quick catch up. And what we discover is that a new HOH has already been crowned. Nominations have already been made for the house. And the HOH is Xavier. Xavier, as much as he talks about throwing early comps, he's winning a few now, right? He wins the competition. Apparently, I heard just a real quick discussion. Kylan was talking about, it almost sounds like they were having to run around and find symbols or icons, or find something hidden around a wall of some sort. Maybe like 3 of them they had to find. Not real clear, but it sounds like it was not hide and go veto or anything like that, but it sounds like it could have been some kind of search, find something against a wall. I don't know. We'll find out more when we see the episode, but some kind of skilled type something of that sort, finding something on a wall. So anyway, Xavier is one HOH, and we find out that on the block nominations have been made, and it is Azah and Kylan on the block. And it sure appears that right now Azah is a huge target and probably the odds-on favorite to be going home and finish up in 4th place and just miss out on the final 3. I can relate to you on that one, Azah. But not guaranteed yet. We haven't played the veto, so we'll find out what happens. But it seems like Azah is on the outs with the 3 guys, and she definitely is on the block, which gets rid of her argument that she's going to make. Now, she'll still, if she makes it to final 2, she'll still say, look, I was on the block a whole lot less than anyone else. I played such a great social game. I didn't get need to put on the block. But that's if she makes it to final 2. And that seems very, very iffy right now. So soon after we see the feeds return, we see Big D acting very upset, just very despondent and depressed. Now, Big D tends to play the role of Eeyore a little bit. A whole lot of woe is me. I'm heading out the door. Life is horrible. He does that every week. And I've never known how much of that is an act and how much of it is just Big D being very paranoid and suspicious every week. I'm not sure, but he's worried this week. He feels like he's burned his bridges with Azah, that he really doesn't have any way, any path to win this thing anymore, that he's burned bridges with her. And if she has a choice, she's not saving him at this point in time. He feels like he gave her too much information. about separate agreements he had with Kyland and another agreement with Xavier. And this is all he's conveying this to Xavier in the living room. He's telling Xavier that, yeah, Azah is upset that she is never going to take me to Final Three now if she wins Veto, because she found out that I was working a lot of deals with a whole lot of different people. And he's just going on and on about it for a long period of time with a lot of people. Big D, really? Really? Azah, who may be too loyal for this game, and now he's worried that she's going to turn on him. Again, I think he is worried every week, but this just doesn't ring true in terms of his worry this week. And it turns out it isn't true, because later we hear him telling Azah to act like she no longer likes him. Big D, not a bad strategy. Big D obviously wants the two guys to take him and Azah to the Final Three over the other guy. And so he knows that Xavier and Kylander would both be hesitant to send the other person home and take Big D and Azah with them to a Final Three, knowing that Big D and Azah are tight and would likely take each other to the Final Two if they had the choice. So Big D apparently has come up with the idea, make it look like they're upset the way things turned out and they don't like each other, and there's no way they would take each other to a Final Two together, just as a way to maybe encourage either Xavier or Kylan, depending on who wins the veto, to boot the other guy and save Azah and Big D. So that's the strategy. Yeah, he's saying all of that and acting so upset. It's just an act. That's all it is. But we've got that little bit of strategy. So expect a lot of fake disliking, a little argument and everything between Azah and Big D for the rest of the week. Now, just as an FYI, during my season, Nicole and I considered a similar strategy and talked about staging a fake fight. I think it was at Final Five, making it look like we were on the outs with each other so we could get information from both sides and maybe make it more likely that they wouldn't see us as a duo and be afraid of taking us on. We considered a very similar strategy. At the end, we just didn't think people would really buy it, really think that we were that upset with each other. So we never made it happen, but Big D's going to give it a shot. All right, so in addition to Big D acting very despondent throughout the evening, we also see Azah cuddling with Xavier in the HOH room soon after the feeds come back. Just more evidence that Azah really probably was not being honest with Hannah and saying that Xavier had been her target. Could it be that Azah is just trying to get closer to Xavier, knowing that her game is at high risk right now and she wants to be saved? Well, yeah, I think both are likely. I think she's trying to stay as close as she can to Xavier, but I also think that she always wanted to get Hannah sent out the door. There's really not a lot of strategy talk between the two of them, just some cuddling, a lot of talking about what they believe the final competitions are going to be in the house. Well, based on the last few seasons, I expect a fairly hard physical challenge for this veto that also incorporates some kind of memory of past events that took place in the house. During my season, it was a giant slingshot. We had to knock down pictures of house guests who did or didn't receive punishments during different events, things like that. I expect something very similar this season, which certainly would seem to indicate that Xavier or Kylan have the inside track to winning that veto and having the overall decision to send someone home, right? I mean, that may be a big deal, win some huge physical competition, and just not going to be betting on it. All right, eventually we've got Xavier and Azah starting to feel a little bad because Big D's down by himself playing the woe is me act, and so they feel a little sorry for him. They eventually head downstairs, talk to him a little bit. Big D is talking to Azah, and he's telling her, and they're alone. Now, maybe he's thinking because Xavier's off in the kitchen, maybe he can hear as well. But basically, Big D and Azah are alone, and Big D is saying, look, I don't know what I'm going to do if I win veto. I just don't know, Azah. Why would you tell Azah this? What is the purpose of doing this and making her uncertain about her loyalty to you and your loyalty to her? I don't get why you would do this unless Big D is trying to prepare her, soften her up for a little bit for when he doesn't use the veto on her, assuming he wins the veto. That's really the only thing I can get, unless he thought that Xavier was in earshot, and so he was trying to continue the charade of we're not on the best terms with each other. But I don't think that's the case. I think it's just Big D in his own mind trying to prepare for the possibility that he may not be as loyal to her as she expects him to be, and him trying to prepare her a little bit for that. we'll see. It may not make a difference if he doesn't win the veto, but he's at least laying some groundwork for that. We've got Kylan spending a long time in the workout room, riding a bicycle, juggling sponges, and going over days and memory events all at the same time. Pretty impressive. Kylan is getting ready for this final competition or two. Later, we've got Big D and Xavier talking some more. Big D continues to talk about why Azah is so upset with him and saying he's likely going home this week. He ends up doing the same thing with Kylan a little bit later while the two of them are eating dinner together by themselves. They are eating at the new tiny table, so they've got it down to the smallest table, which is pretty cool when you're in that house and you realize that you start out with that huge table at set 16. Now you have just this tiny little coffee table. It really hits home how far you've advanced in the game. So Big D continuing to play the kind of a little bit of a pity party with everyone in the house. We later have Big D and Xavier in the HOH room. Now, this is interesting. They're talking. Xavier is basically confirming he wants to take Big D to the final two over Kylan. Could it be because he's just talking to Big D? Yeah, it's possible because he's also talked throughout the evening. He mentioned to Xavier that they were tight and all of that. But I kind of think that Xavier, if he has a choice, would send Kylan home and keep Big D. I do think that Big D may be his tightest connection right now. I may be wrong, but I think that's the case. And he's confirming to Big D saying, yeah, I want to take you. I think that's the best game for me to do is to take you forward. Big D is talking about how worried he is and Xavier should be as well if either one of them is sitting next to Azah in a final two. And he didn't really mention exactly why. I think he said everyone likes Azah, that she's going to say, I didn't get on the block to the very end. All I did was lay here. I didn't win anything, and I still made it. So, I'm in this huge threat. I obviously played a big social game. So he's saying, look, both of us should be worried about sitting next to Azah in a final two. Again, I feel like he's just starting to throw her under the bus a little bit in order to protect his own game, which I get. It's fair enough. But Xavier is also talking about the possibility of sending out Kylan before final three because he thinks that beating Azah is going to be much easier than beating Kylan when you get to those final three competitions. And he explains how it works to Big D. Says the first part is very physical and endurance type competition, which I would think I should be able to win, especially if it's me and you and Azah. He says, and then the second part's a mental competition. I feel like you do much better against Azah than you would against Kylan in that part. So it makes it easier for you and I to be those final two if we keep Azah over Kylan. So it sounds like that may be the path that both these guys are considering. We do have Azah and Big D towards the end of the evening suggesting that Azah suggesting to Big D, she's saying, look, taking out Kylan, that'd be considered a big move. The jury would respect that. They would see that as a huge move if either one of us was to do it. Again, everyone working on protecting their own relationships, their own game. But Azah also is talking about, not just from a strategy standpoint, why it may be good to get Kylan out the door, but also from an emotional standpoint. She's a little upset. She's upset with Kylan, saying that he disrespected her by not checking in with her before using his veto to save Xavier in this last double eviction. That she said he should have at least just let me know that he was going to pull Xavier off. He didn't do anything. That's complete disrespect. I was only HOH for 30 minutes and he disrespected me during that time period. So she's upset with that. She also says he's made two mistakes in the last two rounds. One, disrespecting her HOH. And earlier, she's still upset that he was working to get Tiffany out over Hannah. Now, he was HOH, so he couldn't vote, but she still feels he's responsible for heading Tiffany out the door instead of Hannah. And she's saying, look, it would have been much better for him to protect Tiffany, to let Tiffany stay, get Hannah out the door, and then let Tiffany and Xavier go against each other, get those two targets going against each other, and we all would have been safer. He would have been safe. And so she's upset. She did not want Tiffany going home over Hannah, and she's blaming Kylan for that as well. So when they talk about that, eventually Big D goes back to the conversation he had earlier, telling Azah, saying, look, pretend that we don't like each other, that we can't stand each other. That's going to make it the easiest for either of those guys to potentially take both of us to a final three. So there you have it. Lights out about 1:30 or so in the morning. So they shut down a little bit early. I don't know if the veto is going to be held today or if it's going to stay on a regular schedule and be held on Saturday. No, we'll find out as we watch the live feeds. But everyone to bed a little bit earlier than usual. And real quick, scenarios, what's going to happen? Where do we go from here? Again, this week, it's not so much about HOH. Now, Xavier, by winning HOH, is guaranteed a final 3 spot. But beyond that, it's all about who wins the veto gets to decide who the other person is that goes with Xavier and the veto winner to a final 3. So the veto, huge importance this week. So what happens if Xavier wins the veto? I expect that he's going to send Kylan home. Kylan's talked all about he wants to compete with the strongest person in the final 2 chair and all that. Not Xavier. Xavier wants the easiest path to victory. So if Xavier wins veto, I think he sends Kylan home. If Big D wins veto, I think he sends either Kylan or Azah home. I kind of think it may be Azah, but I'm not as certain on that one. Kylan wins. I think he sends Azah home. Again, I'm not really 100% certain, but I think he sends her home. I'm pretty certain Kylan probably sends Azah home. And if Azah wins, then I'm almost positive she sends Kylan home. There you go. All right, guys, I guess that's my clue to shut it down. Y'all have a great one. SKD 143. Talk to y'all tomorrow. Cheers, guys. Bye.